One of the challenges that you face as a project owner is deciding on the scope of your project. I mean, when we have dreams, what are we always told? Dream big, right? And so you get this big dream and this big idea that you want to do. And so you bring it to Kickstarter or crowdfunding site because you want to fund this big idea. Sometimes though, we kind of lose sight of what we're supposed to be doing. And so we're going to come back to those 3 letters, MVP, minimal viable project. What you need to do is to think about your project and then to break it down into smaller pieces. Minimal viable project. If you were to boil everything away and bring your project down, what's the smallest that project could be and still be successful? Oh, I want to do this massive production. I want to do a documentary, or I want to do a huge festival or something. All right, well, we understand that it takes a lot of money to do these projects, but the more money you ask for, the harder it is sometimes to fund. And don't be seduced by some of the success stories that you've seen on Kickstarter. Oh, the guy had an idea in his garage, put it up there, and $9 million later, he's got the project. Those are few and far between, and there's often a perfect storm of factors that have to come into play to make that effective. In your case, you're trying to raise money to be successful, because remember, on a project like Kickstarter, if you don't hit your minimum funding goal, you don't get any money. It's all or nothing. So what we want to do is find that minimum amount of money necessary for you to achieve your project. And sometimes to find that minimum amount of money, you have to find the elements of your project that you can distill. Maybe you can break your projects into a couple of different factors. I know somebody who did a documentary. Well, they decided to fund just the editing of that, and were able to raise money just to edit the film rather than try to fund the entire project. There was just one piece they wanted to fund. Or if you're a CD that you're trying to make, again, maybe it's studio time that you need. Try to fund just the minimal piece that you can get away with. We call that minimal viable project. Because if you do, then that increases the likelihood. For example, the stats showed, now these stats all change as Kickstarter continues to evolve in other crowdfunding sites, but the stats show that you have that those projects under $10,000. Now I'm being careful here because we got to be careful between causality and just coincidence. And that is, projects that are under $10,000 on Kickstarter tend to fund 65% of the time. Or to say it a different way, 65% of the projects under 10,000 funded. Now, do they fund because they're under 10,000 or what? We don't know, but that's just a stat for you to take a look at. The other one though is, if your project's above $10,000, those projects fund 42% of the time. So that's an important thing to think about. How much money do you want to ask for in order for you to achieve your minimal viable project? So it's important that when you're doing that, you look at the project. Okay, I've got this big project. Are there pieces that I can break it down into? Can I fund it in phases? Can I fund just the core of it? And then we set stretch goals. And we'll talk about stretch goals in another segment. But what is the minimum amount of money that I need to raise to achieve the minimum amount of project? Now this might be counterintuitive. You might not like to hear this because you're like, oh, it's going to be big, it's going to be successful. Well, I just need to tell you something. Just remember that success can start with small baby steps, because you might think that you're working on a very smaller project, but that project can become a lot bigger if you start off with an initial small amount of core success. So that's my advice. Find your minimal viable project so you can start small and succeed big.